Greetings, everyone. I'm Pastor Ron Triplett. I'm the lead pastor at Gethsemane United Methodist Church in Capitol Heights, Maryland.
And I'm Pastor Michael Parker, and I serve as the lead pastor at Journey United Methodist Church.
And together, we are the Lower Prince George's County Cluster. As many of you know, our services are pre-recorded, but this morning we thought it necessary to take time and give a joint pastoral message regarding the Derek Chauvin trial in the murder of George Floyd. As you know, we would not have even known about this in its fullness and in its veracity if it weren't for the brave act of a young teenage girl who took out her camera and filmed this whole act, this whole heinous act. Our hearts were shattered as we watched Mr. Floyd's life being taken from him. And we were somehow relieved when that individual was held accountable for his actions.
George Floyd is among the just under 1,000 people who have died within the past year at the hands of law enforcement. People of black and brown descent have been killed at a rate 2 times as high as that of white people. That alarming statistic reminds us that we who are called to bear light in this world must not stop until justice prevails in every home, in every neighborhood, in every elected office, until this entire world looks like what God had in God's image when God said, "Let there be." As Wesleyan people, we are not just called to personal holiness, but we are called to social holiness as well. And saints of God, we have an obligation to work, to do our part until this world looks just like that.
And while there was a verdict in this particular trial, and while this particular policeman was held accountable, we realized that there are other trials for the other 3 policemen that were present at that time. And we also realized that at around the same time, there were other young people, there were other people who lost their lives due to police shooting. And they are Adam Toledo, Micaiah Bryant, Dante Wright, Andrew Brown Jr. And while we were relieved at one act of justice, we are reminded that it was one act of justice. And we are encouraged, or we need to make sure that we remain vigilant. We need to make sure that we remain vigilant in prayer, praying for one another, praying for our country, praying for our youth, praying for just everybody. And we also need to remain vigilant in holding our elected officials accountable. We need to remain vigilant in holding our policemen and women accountable. Not only that, but we need to remain vigilant in holding one another accountable in our communities. And in doing so, we can do what the Bible says, watch as well as pray. And that's what we need to do. We do not need to get tired. We do not need to grow weary. We do not need to think that everything is just okay. The fight is still going for justice for all people.
I join Pastor Triplett in calling for vigilance. And I also remind us of our responsibility to condemn and resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever form it presents itself. When we do this, beloved, our fight for justice prevails.
So I remind you of what the Apostle Paul said. Be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. And the work of the Lord is the work of justice. For as much as you know, your labor, our labor, is not in vain. People of God, let us worship.